Hi everyone, I'm Zac Greenberg, co-founder of Musicians for Health and your host of Brain Food. Today we'll be talking to Katy Rosenblatt about Expressive Therapy Continuum and child development.
My name is Katy Rosenblatt, and I just graduated from Naropa from the Transpersonal Clinical Mental Health Counseling track, specifically Expressive Arts Therapy. So you see that I love the art and color and all that stuff. Yeah, it was interesting. Last semester of graduate school, COVID happened and everything went online and everything went to telehealth. So talk about being thrown right into the water. It was
Yeah,
awesome in that way, because I just learned a lot really fast.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And it also, how was it with that transition? Do you think it was easier or would have been more difficult if it happened a little later? If you had already been set up and practicing within a normal situation, do you think that transition would have been simpler or would
I
have
think
been
harder.
harder? Yeah,
I do think harder. And I think a lot of people obviously are stressed out about this situation and whatnot. But I know for me, and obviously I'm stressed out about it, but it was really nice to go from, okay, like I'm working with clients one-on-one, we're seeing each other, to, oh, like there's more direct contact here. And I feel like I'm able to reach a larger population this way. And I also think that the work has been a little bit more authentic.
mm,
So the transition I found to be a little bit easier, but I also don't know, is that because people are so stressed with the current situation that they're looking for any type of connection and help? Or is it oh, I don't always have to physically travel somewhere to get the help that I want. I can do this accessibly.
yeah,
Um, but it's still all a learning game.
yeah, yeah. And either way, they're both the means to a healthier ends, no matter
Absolutely.
is spurring it on. So ETC, what is it exactly?
Yeah.
Where do we
So
start? How do people start engaging with this, or when do they start thinking about looking for you or people like you?
So the ETC is really, it's all about the art materials and like how people interact with art materials, what's going on in your brain, what's going on in your body. So naturally, if you're a creative person, you're already engaging in it without really even knowing it, which is pretty cool. But somebody like me, who is the therapist and trying to help a client, I use the ETC to really navigate what's happening cognitively and developmentally with the client, so that way I can assess what they need in that moment and then bring the materials that they to kind of evoke or to work with a certain emotion, but also steering away from other art materials that could provoke other emotions that I don't want.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's just a really good way. It's a schematic model that serves to assess an individual's level of creative functioning based on aspects such as the artist's purpose for creation, choice of medium, interaction, and imagery. But that way, as an art therapist, I can assess the strengths, weaknesses, and disconnect in the levels of cognitive functioning, and then I can properly diagnose and aiding possible recovery.
and so what sort of materials are beneficial, or what does that process look like? What is your toolkit?
Oh, toolkit. I love that term. So again, any material that you could work with. So immediately, I think people think of either restrictive materials or really fluid materials. And that's how the ETC is broken down. If you look at a chart of the ETC, all of the left side functions deal with the brain hemisphere. So that corresponds with functions that are sequential, language oriented, and logical. So the art materials tend to be more structured, controlled, rigid, dry.
Mm,
So a lot of that would be like collaging or working with clay. Then the right side obviously responds to the right hemisphere of the brain, and that corresponds to the functions that are described as intuitive, visual based, spatial, emotional, spiritual. And the art materials tend to be more unstructured, fluid, uncontrolled, and wet. So that's where like paint, watercolor, things like that. And then you titrate between different levels. So it starts at the first level, which is the kinesthetic and sensory level. Then you move up to the cognitive symbolic level. Then you move up to the, the second level is perceptual and affective. I got ahead of myself. And then the top level, symbolic cognitive, then which reaches to the creative state. So you titrate between all of these while you're in the state of creation.
Mm-hmm.
So the first level is really experimenting with the art material. How's it like, what's happening in your body? Does it like excite you? Or are you kind of like, oh, I don't want to work with this at all? Like, ugh. And then moving up, it is more of like the thought process that goes into working with the material. And it's shifted from the experience alone to the intent to express an intention, which then moves up to the cognitive symbolic level, which brings in metaphor and intent.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And as moving up, like we're actually moving up our brain, right? From our stem to each of these layers is also, it's theoretically a kind of a pyramid, but it's also as our...
Yes. So you're technically moving up the brainstem to the limbic system, to the prefrontal cortex. So it is like a full brain, like full body nervous system experience.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool. It seems like physical therapy for your brain almost. Like it's like a complete kind of workout system to like almost get it all to engage and fire together happily.
Absolutely. And it's creating new neural pathways to connect and work with each other. And also too, you got to take into account what age, because a lot of kids and anyone under 25, your brain's still developing, so you can only, some ages, like let's say 6 years old, they're not going to be able to get past, the perceptual and affective level of the ETC, just because like their brains can't handle that. They're not fully developed yet.
Uh-huh.
So I kind of like looking at the first level as in the stage of development, like the toddler stage. Like, how kids like put everything in their mouth, they touch everything. It's such a sensory tactile experience. That's like what the first level is.
Okay.
And then the second level is, I call it teenage brain, because it's all about that emotion and like that angst and being like, oh, I want this and I'm going to do this. But they're still not fully developed, but they're starting to make connections.
Mm-hmm.
And then the top level is the adult brain that can, again, prefrontal cortex, like can put symbolism, metaphor, intent into a finished piece.
Mm-hmm. And then the fourth you were saying, right, is that kind of the connectivity of being able to access that all.
Yes, yeah. The creative level where you can work across the spectrum for each level. You can titrate between, and ultimately that's, I think, when people are like, oh, I finished this piece, whether that's music, artwork, a narrative story, a play, that is what the fourth level represents.
And so you talk about how if we start with children that we can only advance to a certain whatever stage that their brain's developed in. Do you find similarities working backwards? If you're working with a senior or someone like that, is that part of what the old, trying to teach an old dog new tricks is, for them to be able to access those lower functions? Is that work similarly, or?
Honestly, that's a really interesting question, because all of the times that I have worked with elderly, it's been in hospice. So it's been in a situation like where they have dementia and they're trying to remember. So we'll bring music in and we'll bring in the arts, and some really fluid materials actually helps with memory. So a lot of times it's like trying to build that connection back to the self. So I'm not quite sure. A lot of times also elderly, as you see, like really can't hold like, things. So again, I guess it kind of is really based on that first level of like really tactile sensorial experience, and where does your mind go? Something that's so powerful and beautiful about art materials is I can totally take you to a different place.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the first times that I worked in hospice that this woman was working with clay, and she was just netting it like this, nothing big. And she went into a memory of like being a young mom.
Oh,
And it
wow.
was so touching to experience, because I mean, like, you could tell she was there, and
Yeah.
like hands stopped, and just that action allowed her to go to a place that she hadn't gone before. And it was really beautiful. It was really touching. And her family got to see that,
Wow.
got to
Yeah.
be a part of that. And that was totally not even the reason why she was working with clay. So it's amazing how unexpected things can happen.
How do working with mixed mediums work into all of this? So like while you having someone work through clay or paint or work on something visual, let's say, will you have them listen to music, or is it better for them to be in silence and meditative in that way? Or
It depends on the person. Sometimes I will blare music, because sometimes clients get, I think a lot of times, unless like you're in your own space, you kind of need a noise distraction sometimes to like get into the zone. And how awkward is it to go into a therapist's office, work for an hour or two, and be in total silence and like, are you
yeah.
at me? So I think that sometimes like loosening it up,
Mhm.
and I let them choose the music. Sometimes people do just like want their space. So that's when I'll make art too,
Yeah.
which is also it's a very interesting dynamic there. I think it totally depends on the person and the artist and the present moment, what's happening in that environment.
And so a lot of this work conceptually, that like an execution that we've been talking about, is very individualized, but you do group sessions too, right? And how does that work with translating that from one person then now having to deal with different mental states levels? Probably are they grouped by their cognitivity, or how does that all work?
So one of the groups that I loved running in my internship was a specific age group. It was between the ages of 9 and 11. So we called it in between.
Hmm.
And every single one of those kiddos also had a learning disability to an extent. So they had two common grounds: age and a development issue. So that worked out really well. And they built a really amazing community within themselves. And the group was just exploding towards the end, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And they made it very easy to transition from in-person to computer. We laid out respect rules right away, and everyone agreed to it, which was awesome. Another group that I lead is a teen group, and it's all about transitions. And it's an open group. The other one was closed. It was specific, and it has a set time date. Now, the more open groups, it's almost like an open studio model where it's open to anyone. It's free. People can come in, create, hang out. But that one is specific to teens.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to start a younger kiddo group, just so that way they can feel different art materials and see how it's working, and ultimately get their parents involved, and just kind of have like a fun bonding experience with the family.
Yeah. And I know you mainly work with kids, and we've talked a lot about kids, but it's not really, it's any age. There's varying levels of this being extremely healthy, right?
Yeah, and honestly, I get way more out of this with adolescents and older, and up, because they're able to have the vocabulary to communicate what
Mhm.
is happening with them. Because again, I think this is also a really great way to be attuned with your body,
Uh-huh.
and to connect with your body of like, oh, this feels weird, what's going on? And I don't think littles necessarily have that ability.
Yeah.
A lot of kiddos still think of this as like, this is just an art class,
Yeah.
even though no, it's not. And it's still effective.
Hmm.
But the ETC really comes into an older, more complex and mature brain.
And is this something that would be done with families or with like spouses, or that
Totally.
sort of doing like marital therapy, and like any different relationship wise? Is that a
It could totally work for any therapy model, for any expressive therapies, whether that is okay, anything that falls into the umbrella. But yeah, this could work for anybody. It's just really learning the ETC. And once you learn it, it's really easy to be like, oh, that's what this is. Okay. And again, naturally, if you're an artist or a creative person, you're going through it. You just don't realize it.
Uh-huh.
So, and I have worked with siblings with this one, and it was mind blowing,
Mm-hmm.
like crazy informative. So again, easy to learn. Lisa Hines wrote an amazing book just called The Expressive Therapy Continuum. She's really the forefront leader on giving that information out for today. And she also like breaks it down into how this could work in groups. How could this work in couples therapy, family counseling, bringing it into other modalities. And so this is just really like, can really erupt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Katy, thank you so much. And we'll definitely post that link, and any other links that you can think of, we'll put with it as well, so that we can provide some other information about this amazing therapy that until we really started talking about it, I knew nothing about. And it's so interesting and seems so limitless to its potential for healing in different ways.
Thank
So
you so much.
thank you again for being with us. And I'll see you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.